Hello and welcome to the 31st Annual Citizens of Courage Awards. Thank you for taking your precious time to join us for this event virtually. I want to acknowledge the hundreds of people who are tuned in right now. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm Stephan. It's an honor to serve as your district attorney and to host this special awards ceremony. The annual Citizens of Courage Awards is an extension of our mission at the DA's office to pursue equal and fair justice for all and to build safe neighborhoods in partnership with the communities we serve. Today, we're highlighting the extraordinary courage of victims and Good Samaritans who were placed in dangerous and trying circumstances. We hold this event each year in conjunction with National Crime Victims' Rights Week. I know you won't soon forget the stories of the 4 citizens of courage we're recognizing today. My favorite poet, Maya Angelou, said that courage is the most important of all virtues because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. The people we honor today exemplify this saying. I want to thank the recipients for allowing us to tell their stories. They're all watching this afternoon. And I want to thank all of you who took your time to join us online today, helping us honor victims of crime. I also want to thank all of our community partners for their commitment to supporting crime victims' rights today and over the years. We can't do it without you. That includes the ongoing commitment to victims and public safety by the current San Diego County Board of Supervisors, led by Chair Nathan Fletcher and Vice Chair Nora Vargas. We are the People's Prosecutor for communities across this great county. We handle all felony crimes in San Diego County, 40,000 cases a year. Prosecutors, DA investigators, paralegals, victim advocates, legal support assistants, and many more all work as a team to get the job done. The individuals you're going to meet today are just a representation of the many victims and witnesses we interact with. We have a team of victim advocates who work with thousands of crime victims every year. In fact, the DA's office is the largest provider of victim services in the county. Our victim advocates come into people's lives when they're often at their lowest, with many kinds of support. And I'm so proud of the work that they do. Just to put it in perspective, one victim advocate will work with about 100 new victims of crime each month. Linda Pena is the director of the Victim Services Unit and along with the entire Victim Services team does an outstanding job. The Citizens of Courage Awards began in 1990. That's the year that I started as an entry-level deputy district attorney, and it has continued for 32 years. So today we keep that tradition alive and we honor all victims and survivors of crime. Let's get started. Our first citizen of courage stepped in and stopped a man who was intent on sexually assaulting a young woman. Eddie Michael didn't hesitate. He put his own life in danger and likely saved the life of a student at San Diego City College.
When I first got this case, the first thing I thought was, this is a nightmare with eyes wide open. This is a nightmare in broad daylight. When she first started down that little pathway, she didn't notice really anyone down at all in that area. But as she neared the end of it, she saw a man emerge from the last alcove. You see the photographs in this case, you see the claw marks that she has on her waistline as he was trying to remove her pants. to escalate his violence from striking her with his fists to kneeing her repeatedly in the face. She felt her head knock back into the wall, and she at first was fighting back, but as it continued and the violence escalated, she just really felt like her testimony was she felt like giving up.
When I heard the scream for help, it just naturally made me stop and then just to look to see where it was coming from, see what's going on. And then that's when I heard that girl scream, and so then I stopped and then I turned. When I turned, I saw her sitting on the ground and the guy standing above her.
Kneeing her in the face repeatedly. And again, he did something which I find to be unexpected nowadays, which is he intervened. He said, "What are you doing?"
When he saw me reach for my cell phone, that's when he bent over and was reaching into his back. I thought he was going to take out a weapon.
When something out of the ordinary is happening, you don't know what can happen by interfering.
I was pretty not knowing what to do. I was just reacting pretty much, to try to get this guy away from her. That was my main goal, either by, scaring him or talking to him. But as long as he wasn't near her, I figured he couldn't hit her no more. The girl, she was on the ground crying and she was bleeding, spitting up blood.
256 on the north side of that building.
So when County Police came back, I told him, he went in that direction. They went over there and luckily they found him before, he disappeared into downtown.
Without Eddie, who was prepared like a professional witness, he's had no experience in court whatsoever, we would not have been able to achieve this. I think we all know what would have happened if he wouldn't have interfered, because no one would have interfered. And she would have been living with that the rest of her life.
I was glad I was there that day, just happened to be the one.
He was the only person there, and he said, "I'm going to do it." And that level of bravery from someone this humble is remarkable.
Doing what's right, I didn't think it was right that, he was hitting on her.
He absolutely saved her life.
Thank you, Eddie, for doing the right thing that day and for helping us hold the attacker accountable in court. Our next citizen of courage knows all too well that life can change in an instant. Bruce Meisen was seriously injured by a drunk driver and nearly lost his life. But he decided early on that he would turn what happened to him into something positive, and that's exactly what he's done.
It's about 6:30 a.m. in the morning, and Bruce was riding his motorcycle to go teach a motorcycle safety class at a local community college.
I was at a four-way stop of an intersection, and I stopped at the intersection, proceeded into the intersection, and was struck by a drunk driver.
Witnesses at the intersection said Bruce and his motorcycle flew about 10 feet in the air and landed on the corner of the intersection. Bruce suffered major injuries. His right foot, lower right leg was crushed. His entire right rib cage was broken. His right pelvis was fractured. He had cervical injuries, spinal injuries, brain bleed.
Lungs collapsing and pneumonia, and then a blood infection that nearly took my life. So there were a number of medical emergencies along the way.
He almost died. He lost his spleen, and they had to amputate his right foot below the right knee. It was really a miracle that he survived all those very serious internal and external injuries. But one of the first things that Bruce said to me was, "Mike, I want to turn this into a good thing. I don't want to be a victim. I want to make this a good thing. I want to do something with what happened to me right off the bat. And it just really impressed me. He wanted to speak to individuals and groups, high school students, and work for MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, to talk about the tragedies of drunk driving. But as Bruce said, the terrible things in life aren't always about the terrible. And I thought that was a great quote.
Felt more attuned to the problem in its entirety. Not the bee that stung me, but the swarming bees that I want to do something about.
He'll speak for the news agencies, for CHP, for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. He goes to high schools and speaks to high school students. And it's pretty impressive to see him standing up there on his prosthetic blade leg, telling everybody, hey, I'm a victim of drunk driving, and here's what happened to me. And it was totally preventable.
I do feel called to this. I feel compelled to do this. So it's easier from that standpoint, as I have something to say.
It's very powerful. He stands in front of thousands of high school students, and you can see the kids. I've watched them. They sit there in rapt attention.
But I want them to understand that it's not that hard for a regular person to find themselves in the position that the young man who struck me is in. That we get a couple drinks in, and we think that it's going to be okay, and we go for it. I'm trying to tell them that don't take that practice that we move through the world and apply it to drinking and driving. It won't be okay. The risk is too high for their own welfare and for innocent people such as myself.
Bruce always saw both sides of the picture. He saw the tragedy that happened to him, but he also saw the tragedy for this young man who had no criminal record and made a terrible choice early one morning to drink and to drive.
I feel in a literal sense, if I could keep one person from hurting someone else or destroying their lives, then it literally is a good trade, just as if you were to step in front of a bus and save someone and be injured, you would say, that's a good trade. And the tricky thing is there's no way to quantify it, right? You don't know what you've prevented. So it is in a way an endless journey, but that's what I'm trying to do is add meaning to a meaningless situation.
Bruce easily could have curled up in a ball and said, I'm a victim, and lost everything. But he didn't, and right off the bat when I met him and he was struggling, really struggling, physically and mentally, he said, I want to turn this into something good.
Bruce, thank you for giving back to our community and doing what you can to stop drunk and drug driving. I have no doubt that your efforts, your courage, are making a difference. Our next recipient stopped at a fast food restaurant with her daughter to get some food. But that decision turned into one of the most terrifying moments of Rosa Martinez's life, when she thought she had lost her daughter forever.
We were on our way to soccer practice, and my daughter was hungry before we went to practice, so I stopped at Church's Chicken because we normally do. I was going to go through the drive-thru, but it was too packed, so I parked and I told her, here, just go get, what we normally get, and, I'll be right here outside waiting for you.
Maribel Ibanez was working at the Church's Chicken along with several of her coworkers when she waited on the defendant, Mr. Blake. He was trying to pay with a counterfeit $100 bill, and Ms. Ibanez very politely actually declined him, suggested he try to go somewhere else and cash it, and he left, came back in, left, came back in. The final time he came back in, he came with a gun that was hidden in the pocket of his hoodie jacket.
I saw her order, and then I looked down at my phone. And then I just heard gunshots, and I looked up, and I didn't see her no more. I thought I had lost her. And then he walked out like if he didn't do anything.
He waited in line behind a 12-year-old girl, waited till she was done ordering and stepped aside, and then he stepped up and just began shooting at all of the Church's Chicken employees. He shot Maribel Ibanez and she succumbed to her injuries, and he shot 2 other employees and narrowly missed a third.
Turned my car and I pulled up to the front of the Church's, and Alyssa was calling me, and she came out running, and I just hugged her.
Miss Martinez has some medical background, and she wanted to make sure that everyone was okay. So she went back into the restaurant and asked, "Is everyone okay?" And she couldn't see anyone because all the employees had dropped to the ground.
And I said, "Is everybody okay?" And I just heard somebody say no, but I just heard moaning. And I asked him, "Oh my God, where are the keys? How do I lock the door? What if he comes back?" Nobody answered. It was just pure moaning and blood everywhere. I came back out and Alyssa called 911.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, can you hear me? It's 911.
At the Church's Chicken, they shot everybody in there.
What?
They shot everybody in there.
For Miss Martinez and her daughter, I know it was a terrifying experience. I had a lot of witnesses in the case who didn't want to cooperate. And I can understand that, I can appreciate that. They were afraid of this shooter. But they both came to court, they overcame their fear, and they testified not once, but twice, having to sit there in open court and point at that defendant and say, that's the man who did the shooting.
I was scared, I was nervous, especially to be in the same courtroom as he was. But it was something that I felt I had to do.
Miss Martinez in particular was, I think, a champion for her daughter because her daughter was really scared. The first time she had to testify at the preliminary exam, she actually took the stand and immediately started crying. We had to take a break, go outside. Miss Martinez helped bolster her confidence and tell her everything was going to be okay, along with some of our victim advocates who, of course, were wonderful in supporting them. And she was able to come back into court and testify and make sure that justice was served.
So I just told her, you know, the girl who died in the Church's Chicken, if I was her mom, I would want the person who saw him to testify to kind of put him behind bars. You know, I just feel like as a mom, she did lose her child, and I thought I did. I feel like it was for us to put him behind bars and at least give her mom a little bit of justice.
Rosa's story reminds us not only how scary it can be to be a crime victim, but also the enormous responsibility of having to testify in court. Their testimony was critical to the successful prosecution, and we thank them for their bravery. Our final citizen of courage literally ran toward danger, while everyone, understandably, was running away from it. Oscar Stewart was unarmed when shots rang out at the Poway Synagogue, but that didn't stop him from doing everything he could to protect his fellow worshipers in an incredible display of bravery.
911 emergency, dispatch 8240.
Hello?
911.
There is shots here. There is a guy coming with a shotgun and start shooting.
Okay.
April 27th, 2019, it was the last day of Passover, and the Chabad of Poway was offering their regular religious services. About 10:30 in the morning, the defendant drove up in his family Honda Civic and parked it across the street from the Chabad of Poway. There were over 50 people who had already arrived for the morning prayer service.
It's the last day of Passover in that particular year, and it was also a Sabbath service. So there was more people than normal, but I just had this feeling, you know, it's like unexplainable. So I normally sat in the front row because I can't hear very well from years of construction and the military and stuff. So I always sit in the front row, but this particular day I chose to sit in the back.
Lori Gilbert Kay was standing in the foyer, and she was greeting people who had come for services, and she was the first person who was targeted by the defendant. She ended up being shot twice, and behind her was the rabbi who just happened to be walking by. He was shot in the fingers and ended up having a portion of his finger amputated as a result.
I hear a familiar sound, unfortunately. I was in the military, I was in Iraq, and I thought to myself, who's shooting an M16?
The defendant then next turned to the banquet hall, which is just behind the foyer and to the right. And inside the banquet hall, there were a group of children who happened to be playing while the services were going on. In that room, Almog Peretz and his 8-year-old niece, Noya, were also hit. The defendant then turned to the prayer room, which is on the other side of the foyer to the left, and fired additional rounds into the prayer room.
And people were running out, trying to get out the door. My first instinct was to go with the crowd. So I run, I get to the door, the exit, and I just turn around at that point. Decide that I'm not gonna leave. So I go back, I go back towards the gunfire.
He ran into the foyer, ran actually past his wife and his stepdaughter, and started yelling at the defendant and screaming, doing whatever he could to distract him. He literally somehow managed to escape being shot at twice during the course of just a few seconds.
I'm about, say, 10, 15 feet from him, and I used another very forceful expletive. And at this point, he was trying to reload his magazine. I think I scared him because at this point he dropped the rifle to his side and he ran out the front door.
The defendant ended up, rather than reloading and firing additional rounds, ran back to his car where Oscar continued to chase him with a Border Patrol agent who happened to be present.
At this point, the guy tries to get away. We're between the Border Patrol agent and I, and then somebody else came out, I can't remember. We start taking down license plate numbers. At the point, I didn't have anything to write with, so we're trying to memorize it. So he pulls a quick U-turn, jumps up on the curb, probably damages his vehicle. He makes a right down Rancho Bernardo Road, and that's the last we see of him.
Without Oscar's intervention, more people, in my mind, absolutely would have died. I think the easy thing to do would have been to get your family and to run away to safety. But Oscar didn't do that. He risked his life to save every person in that Chabad.
It was very quick. Things happen in a flash and you just react. You never know how you're going to react. And I like to say, maybe the next time this happens, God forbid, I'll do the same thing, but you never know what you're going to do. So I'm just glad that I had the wherewithal to do what I did.
To do that in the face of deadly danger is something that I think a lot of us don't have. And to do it in a way where he's so unassuming and without a second thought, just did it because he knew that was the right thing to do, that's the ultimate level of courage.
Oscar's actions that day undoubtedly saved lives, and by testifying at trial, he helped to hold the shooter accountable for the terror he caused. Thank you, Oscar. I hope today's event has inspired you and made you feel great about your fellow San Diegans. These heroes and sheroes are a window into how extraordinary our community is. Remember, every day we all have the potential to be citizens of courage, even in small ways. Thank you for tuning in and have a good evening.